Welcome. This video contains an overview of the enforcements and statements and payments information located within the ADHS Facility Licensing Portal. Before we begin, it is important to note that although the enforcements information is now available in the portal, the process in which an enforcement is derived from is not changing. The rules and statutes will dictate how and when enforcements are created. To view enforcements related to your facility, log into the Facility Licensing Portal and navigate to the appropriate facility. The Enforcements and Statements and Payments tabs will now appear in the portal. You will be notified of an enforcement via physical mail and possibly an email. Click the Enforcements tab to open the Enforcements page. Let's take a moment for a brief overview of the Enforcements page. In the first column here, we see the enforcement number with a link associated to the enforcement detail page. In the second column, we see the description associated with this enforcement. In the third column, we see the status. Here it shows as in process, which will be the first status you'll see appear in the enforcements. The next column we can see is the action letter sent. This will be the date that the physical mail was sent. Here we can see the hearing request deadline. If a hearing is requested, this is the date that it must be requested by. In the final columns here, we can see the hearing date and time and the ISC date and time. ISC stands for Informal Settlement Conference. These two columns will be used if a hearing and/or ISC is requested. The dates will be populated in these fields. We can then see the Records Found section, which will show any records associated with this page, the count of those records. We can see here, this is the facility information associated with the enforcements. If we move into the enforcement number link here, we can click on this, and it will bring us to the enforcement detail page. We can see in the top section here, this is all information that was pulled from the previous page, as well as the hearing date and time and the ISC date and time. Two new fields here are the hearing case, with the number associated with the hearing that will be populated if a hearing is requested and scheduled. And then we can see here the related files section. This will show any files related to this enforcement detail. They will be clickable with a link and/or downloadable. You can also see this enforcement resulted from section. This will show a link to any of the information for an inspection or an application, items like that an enforcement could be a result of. If we move here, we can see the hearing request button. This will appear if the hearing request deadline has not passed. If you would like to request a hearing, you can click the Request Hearing button, and the pop-up box will appear. It will ask if you would also like to request an ISC. If you would like to request an ISC and a hearing, check the box here and click Submit. You will then receive the success message saying that the request for a hearing and an ISC has been submitted. You can now see the button no longer appears and the hearing and ISC requests have been submitted. Moving down, we can go into the Actions section to see more information regarding this enforcement detail. We can see the name here associated with the action. This is also a link to the action detail page. We'll come back to that in just a minute. We can see here the status associated with this action, the total amount. If there is an amount for a civil penalty, it will be listed here. We can see the start date, the due and end dates, as well as the completed dates associated with this action. Moving back to the action name, I can click on this to be brought to the action detail page. We can now see similar information to what was listed on the previous page. If we move down into the next section, we can now see any payments that have been scheduled and associated with this action detail. We can see here it shows when the next payment is due, the amount, and the total remaining. If we click Pay, we'll be brought to the Statements and Payments tab. We can now see that we've been redirected to the Invoice Detail page. We can see here information that's been associated with the invoice. First, we can start with the invoice number. This is a link to the invoice number. Second, here we can see the status that's associated with the invoice. Here it's listed as sent, meaning the invoice has been sent. We can then see the total and the balance associated with this invoice, as well as the due date for the date that the invoice is due. We can see here a description that could be listed associated with the invoice, and then we can see the Related to Enforcement Payment Plan. This is a link to the related enforcement. Moving here, we can see the selected payment amount, and we can see here the radio buttons associated with the payment amount. If we click one radio button, the number will appear in the section at the top. You can click any button here to have the number change and be updated to that selected payment amount. If we click Other, we're able to enter in the other payment amount that we would like to have listed here. I will select the first payment amount and I will click Submit Payment to submit the payment. I will then see a pop-up that says Payment Amount Selected. It will show the invoice number with the invoice detail as well as the amount. The total amount will be listed here. I can click Next to be brought to the payment information screen. Once I have successfully submitted a payment, I will receive the payment confirmation screen. I can click back to Portal, return back into my facility information, click on the associated facility, navigate back to the statements and payments, where I can now see that the invoice that I have paid is showed as partial and that I have paid part of the balance. If I click back on that invoice number, I'll be redirected into the invoice detail. If I scroll down into the payment schedule section, I can see the one payment that I just paid is now listed as paid. It shows the payment date as well as the payment amount. This has been an overview of the Enforcements and Statements and Payments tabs within the Facility Licensing Portal.